Hands behind your back. Now! The metal ratchets 3 times. Click, click, click. Each sound echoes off concrete walls like a countdown. She doesn't flinch, doesn't run, doesn't beg. She just stands there, spine straight, eyes forward, as if she's been waiting for this moment her entire life. The officer doesn't know it yet, but he just handcuffed a federal agent who has been documenting his unit's crimes for 6 months. Every word he says is being recorded, every violation is being logged, and the cavalry is already on its way. Kelso, secure the vehicle. I'll handle documentation. The second voice belongs to a woman. Colder, more controlled, the kind of voice that issues orders and expects them followed without question. Fluorescent lights flicker overhead. The parking garage sits 3 levels beneath the Sandra Day O'Connor Federal Courthouse in Phoenix. Federal property, federal jurisdiction. The city cops have no business being here, and they know it, but they came anyway. Serena Langford counts silently. 37 seconds from approach to restraint. 15 seconds faster than standard procedure allows. No verbal warning. No request for identification first. No articulation of probable cause. 3 violations in under a minute. Her handbag still sits on the hood of her Honda Accord. Inside, a device no larger than a thumb drive continues its work. Recording, documenting, building a case that will eventually bring this entire precinct to its knees. The sergeant keys her radio. Her voice carries across the empty garage, professional and clipped. Unit 42 to dispatch. 1 in custody at Federal Building Garage, Level B1. Female, black, approximately 35 to 40. Suspicious activity and failure to comply. Failure to comply. Serena had complied with every request, had answered every question, had produced identification when asked. But failure to comply isn't about compliance. It's a code, a justification, a lie dressed in official language. The sign on the pillar 10 feet away reads in bold red letters, Federal property. Unauthorized detention of individuals on these premises may constitute violation of 18 U.S.C. Section 242. All incidents recorded. All incidents recorded. Serena looks up at the camera in the corner. Red light blinking. They don't know yet. But they will. If this satisfying already, hit that subscribe button. Tomorrow's episode reveals the FBI's response. You won't want to miss it. 6 hours earlier, the morning sun cut through the blinds of a 1-bedroom apartment in Tempe. The space was small, but meticulously organized. Bed made with military corners. Closet arranged by color, then by sleeve length. Shoes lined up in perfect rows, like soldiers awaiting inspection. Serena Langford moved through her morning routine with the precision of someone who had spent years learning that carelessness could get you killed. She checked her bag in the same order she had checked it every day for the past 12 years. Wallet, keys, notebook, pen, mints, backup battery, recording device. Each item in its designated pocket. Never changing, never forgotten. The recording device was small enough to be mistaken for a flash drive. Government-grade encryption. 72 hours of continuous audio storage. The kind of equipment that cost $3,000 and required federal authorization to purchase. She slipped it into the inner pocket of her bag and zipped it closed. Her outfit was deliberately unremarkable. Gray blazer from an outlet store, no visible labels. Black trousers, comfortable but professional. Flat shoes with rubber soles, quiet enough to move without announcing her presence, practical enough to run if necessary. No jewelry except a $15 Casio watch. No makeup beyond foundation. Nothing that would draw attention or linger in memory, invisible. That was the goal. That had always been the goal. Her phone buzzed, a message from an unsaved number. Status check. Timeline? She typed back, on schedule, meeting 3 p.m. Then she deleted both messages and headed for the door. The drive to Phoenix took 40 minutes in light traffic. She listened to NPR, budget negotiations, border policy, the usual morning noise, and let her mind run through the day's objectives. 6 months embedded. 18 months of operation total. 4 officers identified. 1 sergeant, 1 detective, 1 lieutenant. And at the top, a deputy chief who had been collecting protection money from the same drug network he was supposed to be investigating. Operation Desert Glass. Named for the way corruption melted through the department like heat through sand, leaving nothing but fractured glass in its wake. Today was supposed to be routine. Meet a contact at 3. Exchange information. Return to cover life. She had no way of knowing that by 2:47, everything would change. The coffee shop on Van Buren Street was busy for a Tuesday morning. Serena took her usual seat in the back corner, spine against the wall, eyes on the front door. Force of habit. Survival instinct dressed as preference. The barista, male, early 20s, blonde hair, delivered her order. Black coffee, no sugar. He set the cup down on her table, then paused, looked at her, looked at the white man sitting at the next table, and placed the receipt between them. You two together? They weren't sitting at the same table, weren't speaking, weren't even making eye contact. No. Serena's voice was flat, neutral, the kind of tone that ended conversations rather than starting them. Oh, sorry. My mistake. The barista retreated without further comment. The white man glanced at her, then away. Something between embarrassment and confusion crossed his face before he buried it in his newspaper. Serena didn't react, didn't explain, didn't waste energy on a moment that would repeat itself 1,000 times over the course of her life. She had learned early that anger was a luxury she couldn't afford. Every emotional response cost energy. Every confrontation created exposure. Every time she let someone see her frustration, she gave them power they hadn't earned. So she drank her coffee in silence and let the moment pass. By 9:45, she was back in her car, heading toward the federal courthouse. The Sandra Day O'Connor Federal Courthouse occupied a full city block in downtown Phoenix. Glass and concrete, modern and imposing. Security at the main entrance was federal grade. Metal detectors, bag scanners, armed guards with serious expressions and no patience for delays. Serena didn't go through the main entrance. She never did. Instead, she drove down the ramp to level B1 of the parking structure. Her spot, third row from the elevator, east side, had become familiar over the past 3 weeks. Close enough to the stairs for quick exit. Within camera range, but not directly beneath the lens. She had clocked the security patterns, shift changes at 7, 3, and 11. Patrol sweeps every 90 minutes. Federal Protective Service officers handled the interior. Parking structure was theoretically shared jurisdiction, but practically ignored, which made it the perfect place for meetings that needed to stay off the official record. She parked, gathered her bag, and was about to exit when movement caught her eye. A patrol car, black and white. Phoenix Metro PD. Not federal, city. Her fingers paused on the door handle. City police had no business in a federal parking structure. The jurisdictional boundaries were clear. Everything beneath the courthouse fell under Federal Protective Service authority. Local cops needed explicit invitation to operate here. There was no invitation. There never had been. Serena watched the car roll slowly past her row. 2 officers inside. The driver was scanning license plates. The passenger was watching the spaces between cars, looking for something or someone. She memorized the unit number, 42. Badge numbers would come later, if necessary. The patrol car turned the corner and disappeared. Serena exhaled, waited, counted to 60. Then she opened her door and stepped out into the fluorescent-lit silence of level B1. 2 hours passed in the rented office on the 4th floor. Southwestern Financial Consulting, LLC, a company that existed on paper, paid its taxes, and employed exactly 0 actual consultants. Serena reviewed files, spreadsheets, financial records that would mean nothing to a casual observer, but told a very specific story to anyone who knew what to look for. Money flowing from street-level drug operations through a network of car washes, nail salons, and convenience stores. Payouts to a shell corporation registered in Delaware. That corporation's primary shareholder, a trust whose beneficiary was listed only as G. Holt, Deputy Chief Grayson Holt, 30 years on the force, decorated, respected, and dirty enough to stain everything he touched. The puzzle was almost complete. A few more pieces, a few more connections. Then the warrants would drop, and Operation Desert Glass would finally deliver the justice it had been building toward for 18 months. At 1:45, her contact messaged, 3 p.m. meeting canceled. Asset compromised. Go dark until further notice. Serena read the words twice. Asset compromised. Which asset? Which part of the network had sprung a leak? She didn't ask. Questions created digital trails. Instead, she deleted the message, packed her bag, and headed for the elevator. Change of plans. No meeting meant no reason to stay. She would retrieve her car, drive back to Tempe, and wait for the next communication. Simple, routine, safe, or so she thought. The parking garage was emptier than it had been that morning. Lunch hour had pulled most of the building's occupants elsewhere. The silence was thick, broken only by the hum of ventilation and the occasional drip of water from overhead pipes. Serena walked toward her car, heels clicking against concrete. Her bag hung from her left shoulder. Her keys were already in her right hand, thumb on the unlock button. She was 10 feet from the driver's door when she heard the boots. Heavy, deliberate, moving fast. "Ma'am, step away from the vehicle." She turned slowly. No sudden movements. Nothing that could be interpreted as threatening. 2 officers stood 15 feet away. The same patrol car she had seen earlier was parked at an angle, blocking the row. Engine still running. Doors open. The male officer was young, maybe 28 or 29. Broad shoulders, aggressive posture, hand resting on the holster at his hip. His nameplate read, Kelso. Badge number 4471. The female officer stood slightly behind him. Older, mid-40s, sergeant stripes visible on her sleeve. Her expression was controlled, unreadable. Shaw, M. Sur Badge 2289. "Is there a problem, officer?" Kelso didn't answer the question. "We received a report of suspicious activity. Someone matching your description has been loitering in this area for several weeks." Loitering. The word sat wrong in the air. Arizona statutes didn't define loitering in federal buildings. There was no law to enforce. "I work in this building. I park here every day." Building security couldn't confirm that. Lie. Serena had been on the approved access list since her first week. Her vehicle registration was logged with FPS. A simple radio check would verify everything. They hadn't made that check, which meant they weren't interested in verification. "I'm happy to provide identification." Her voice stayed level, professional. The voice of someone who understood that tone mattered more than truth in moments like this. Shaw stepped forward. "That won't be necessary. We're going to need you to step away from the vehicle and keep your hands where we can see them." "Under what authority? This is federal property. Your jurisdiction doesn't extend here without federal authorization." The words came out smooth, factual. Not a challenge. Just a statement. The kind of thing any informed citizen might say. Shaw's eyes narrowed. "We have an arrangement with building security. Routine patrol assistance." Line number 2. Serena had read every memorandum of understanding between Phoenix PD and Federal Protective Service. None of them authorized city police to conduct stops in the courthouse garage. "I see. And which FPS supervisor authorized this patrol?" Silence. 3 seconds. 5. Shaw's expression flickered. Just a moment, before the professional mask returned. "I don't need to explain departmental procedures to a civilian. Officer Kelso, begin the vehicle inspection." Kelso moved before Serena could respond. He circled around her, one hand still on his weapon, the other reaching for the driver's door. "I don't consent to a search. I observed contraband through the window." His voice was flat, rehearsed. "Probable cause." There was nothing in the car except a water bottle and a spiral notebook. No contraband, no weapons, nothing that could remotely justify probable cause. But probable cause wasn't the point. It never was. "What specifically did you observe that constitutes contraband, officer? I'd like to note it for documentation purposes." Kelso didn't answer. He was already pulling open the driver's door, leaning inside, rifling through the center console. Shaw moved closer to Serena, close enough that her body blocked the camera's view of what her partner was doing. "You seem to know a lot about procedure." The sergeant's voice was quiet, just between them. "That's interesting. I believe in being informed. Most people aren't. Most people just do what they're told. I'm not most people." Shaw's smile didn't reach her eyes. "No, I don't suppose you are." Well, the search took 7 minutes. Kelso went through the glove compartment, under the seats, in the trunk. He found nothing, because there was nothing to find. But he kept looking. And while he looked, Shaw stood next to Serena, close enough to smell her perfume, close enough to count the buttons on her blazer. "Your driver's license says Serena Langford, Tempe address." Serena didn't confirm or deny. Shaw already had her license. Confirmation was unnecessary. "Financial consulting, that's what you do?" "Yes. And you need to park in a federal courthouse garage for that? I have clients in this building." "Which clients?" "That's confidential." Shaw's eyebrow rose a fraction. "Confidential, sure." She turned toward her partner. "Kelso, anything?" He emerged from the back seat, holding her handbag. She hadn't even noticed him take it from the hood. "This." He reached inside and pulled out the recording device, held it up between 2 fingers like evidence at a crime scene. Not exactly standard office equipment. Shaw took the device from him, turned it over in her hands. Her expression shifted. Recognition, interest, something darker underneath. "Encrypted recording equipment. Government-grade encryption, if I'm not mistaken." The way she said it. Too knowledgeable, too specific. not the observation of a random patrol sergeant. I'm a financial consultant. Client confidentiality requires secure communication. Does it require you to sit in a federal parking garage for 3 weeks taking notes on who comes and goes? Serena's pulse didn't change. Her breathing stayed even. 12 years of training had prepared her for moments like this. Moments when the cover was tested, when the wrong word could unravel everything. I have no idea what you're talking about. Shaw stepped closer. Invasion of space. Classic intimidation tactic. Here's what I think. I think you're not a financial consultant. I think you're something else. And I think you've been watching this building and the people who work in it for reasons you don't want to explain. That's an interesting theory. It's more than a theory. Shaw's voice dropped. We got a tip, anonymous. Said someone was conducting unauthorized surveillance from this garage. Described you perfectly. A tip, anonymous. Which meant someone knew. Someone had seen her. Someone inside the operation had identified her presence and decided to burn her. The asset that had been compromised. It wasn't someone else. It was her. I want to see a supervisor. Serena kept her voice steady. And I want to make a phone call. You'll get your phone call after we process you. Process me for what? I haven't committed any crime. Shaw smiled. Cold, practiced. The smile of someone who had done this before and expected to do it again. Suspicion of unauthorized surveillance. Arizona Revised Statutes, Section 13-3005. Interception of wire and electronic communications. That statute requires intent to intercept communications of others. I was recording myself. Arizona is a one-party consent jurisdiction. Then you have nothing to worry about. Shaw gestured to Kelso. Cuffer. If this story already has you hooked, tap that subscribe button and ring the bell. The confrontation coming next will leave you speechless. The handcuffs clicked 3 times. Too tight. Metal bit into wrists, cutting off circulation in seconds. Serena didn't struggle, didn't protest. She stood perfectly still as Kelso wrenched her arms behind her back, applied the restraints with unnecessary force, and shoved her toward the patrol car. Watch your head. He didn't wait for her to duck before pushing her into the back seat. Her shoulder struck the doorframe. Pain bloomed across her collarbone. The interior of the patrol car smelled like stale fast food and old sweat. Vinyl seats cracked and sticky from Arizona heat. No air conditioning in the back. The windows didn't open. By the time they reached the precinct, the temperature inside the rear compartment would approach 120 degrees. A violation of department policy, a violation of basic human decency. But no one was watching. No one was counting violations. Except her. Kelso slid behind the wheel. Shaw took the passenger seat. The radio crackled with routine traffic, call signs and code numbers, and the mechanical rhythm of a city's law enforcement infrastructure. Unit 42 to dispatch. En route to Precinct 4 with 1 in custody. ETA 15 minutes. Copy, Unit 42. Processing Bay 3 is clear. The car pulled out of the garage, up the ramp, into the blast furnace of Phoenix afternoon. Sunlight stabbed through the windows, turning the sealed rear compartment into an oven. Serena counted her breaths. Slow, even, controlled. 14 hours ago, she had received a routine status check from her handler. In 3 hours, when she missed her scheduled report-in, protocols would activate. GPS tracker in her shoe would begin transmitting. Monitoring station would attempt contact. And if contact failed, emergency procedures would escalate. She just had to survive until then. Precinct 4 was a concrete box from the 1980s, all sharp angles and small windows, and the perpetual hum of straining air conditioning. The processing area occupied the rear of the building, a loading bay converted into a booking station, designed for efficiency rather than comfort. Serena was pulled from the patrol car by Kelso, marched through a metal door, and deposited in front of a fingerprint scanner, while a board officer in a wrinkled uniform asked questions he clearly didn't expect honest answers to. Name? Serena Langford. Date of birth? March 15, 1986. Address? 1847 East University Drive, Tempe. Occupation? Financial consultant. The booking officer typed without looking up. His nameplate read Martinez. Badge 5847. Any medical conditions we should know about? No. Any medications? No. Any allergies? No. Are you currently under the influence of drugs or alcohol? No. The questions continued, a bureaucratic litany designed to create a paper trail that would later be used to prove proper procedure had been followed. Serena answered each one truthfully, noting the timestamp on the wall clock behind the officer's head. 3:27 p.m., 43 minutes since the stop. No Miranda warning, no articulation of specific charges, no opportunity to contact an attorney. Violations 4, 5, and 6. Fingerprints came next. Digital scanner. Each finger pressed flat against the glass, then rolled to capture the full print pattern. The machine hummed and clicked, feeding her information into databases she could only imagine. Empty your pockets. She had nothing in her pockets. Everything had been in her bag, which Shaw had already confiscated. Arms up. A female officer, young, nervous, badge number 6102, nameplate reading Chen, conducted the pat-down. Professional distance, no unnecessary contact. By the book, which was more than Serena had expected. She's clean. Property inventory. Martinez pulled on latex gloves and began removing items from her bag. Each one was photographed, documented, and placed in a clear plastic bin. One black leather wallet containing driver's license, 3 credit cards, $47 cash, 1 key ring with 4 keys, 1 mobile phone, iPhone model, 1 digital recording device, make and model unknown, 1 spiral-bound notebook, 1 pen, black ink. 6 items. Serena counted along with him. All present, nothing missing. Yet. Sign here to confirm inventory. She read the form carefully before signing. The recording device was listed as make and model unknown, which meant they hadn't yet determined what it was. That would change soon. Processing complete. Holding cell 12. The holding cell measured approximately 3 meters by 3 meters. Gray concrete walls. Metal bench bolted to one side. Stainless steel toilet with no seat and no privacy. Single fluorescent light that buzzed like an angry insect. The door closed behind her with a heavy clang. Lock engaging. Sound echoing down the corridor. Serena sat on the metal bench, back straight, hands on her knees. The posture of meditation, or the posture of a soldier waiting for orders. 41 minutes since the arrest. GPS tracker still dormant. It wouldn't activate automatically until her scheduled check-in was missed. She had time. Not much, but some. The question was what they would do with that time. An hour passed. Then 2. No one came, no questions, no food, no water. Just silence and the buzzing light and the gradually cooling air as the sun began its descent outside windows she couldn't see. Serena used the time to review. Every word spoken, every action taken, every face and badge number and timestamp. Building the mental record that would later become sworn testimony. Kelso, V, badge 4471. Aggressive, physical. 3 previous excessive force complaints according to the files she had reviewed during her 6 months embedded. All ruled unfounded. Shaw, M badge 2289. Controlled, strategic. 20 years on the force, positioned for promotion. Connections to city council. Protected by the same network that protected Holt. The tip they mentioned. Anonymous. Describing her perfectly. Which meant someone inside Operation Desert Glass had leaked her presence, either deliberately or accidentally. Asset compromised. Her handler's message suddenly made terrible sense. She was the asset. And now she was exactly where the corrupt officers wanted her. Isolated, documented, vulnerable. The question was whether they knew what she really was, or whether they thought they had simply caught a civilian with suspicious equipment. If they knew, she was in serious danger. FBI agents had died before in situations like this. Accidents in custody, suicides in holding cells, evidence that vanished and witnesses who forgot what they had seen. If they didn't know, she had a chance. Maintain the cover. Wait for extraction. Let the system work. The door opened. The man who entered was not Kelso, not Shaw, not anyone she had seen before. 40-something, gray at the temples, good suit, expensive tie, badge hanging from a lanyard around his neck. Frost, C detective, cybercrimes unit. Corbin Frost. She knew that name, had seen it in the investigation files. Flagged for anomalies in evidence handling. Digital evidence that disappeared. Servers that crashed at convenient moments. A pattern that suggested either extreme incompetence or deliberate sabotage. Ms. Langford, he didn't offer a handshake. I'm Detective Frost. Mind if I ask you a few questions? I'd like to speak with an attorney first. Of course, that's your right. He pulled a chair from the corner of the cell, positioned it directly in front of her bench, and sat down. Close. Too close. Invasion of space presented as casual conversation. But between you and me, an attorney's just going to draw this out. Make things complicated. If you're innocent, and I'm sure you are, the fastest way out of here is to answer a few simple questions. What questions? The recording device we found in your bag. Frost leaned back, crossed one leg over the other, adopted the posture of a man with all the time in the world. It's not the kind of thing you pick up at Best Buy. A ES-256 encryption, hardware key authentication. That's government-grade equipment. I take client confidentiality seriously. Seriously enough to spend $3,000 on a device that even our forensics lab can't crack? My clients value discretion. I'm sure they do. Frost smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. Here's what I'm wondering, though. A financial consultant who parks in a federal courthouse garage, uses government-level encryption, takes notes on the comings and goings of people in that building. That's not consulting. That's surveillance. I've explained my presence. I have clients in that building. Which clients? Give me a name. I'll verify, and this whole thing goes away. She knew the trap. Give a name, any name, and they would contact that person. Verify that no consulting relationship existed. Build a case for fraud, false statements, obstruction. My client list is confidential. Of course it is. Frost uncrossed his legs, leaned forward, close enough that she could smell his cologne. Something expensive. The smell of a man who lived better than a detective's salary should allow. Let me tell you what's going to happen. We're going to hold you for 24 hours while we verify your identity and determine whether that recording device contains evidence of criminal activity. Under what charge? Suspicion of surveillance without consent. Arizona Revised Statutes, Section 13-3005. I'm familiar with the statute. It doesn't apply to self-recording in a one-party consent jurisdiction. The DA will make that determination. He stood, returned the chair to its corner. In the meantime, get comfortable. It's going to be a long night. I want my phone call. Frost paused at the door. Phone system's down for maintenance. Should be fixed by morning. A lie. She could hear a phone ringing somewhere in the building right now. But she didn't argue, didn't challenge. Just added violation number 7 to the growing list and watched him leave. 8 p.m., then 9. Food arrived. Cold oatmeal, stale bread, water in a paper cup. She ate mechanically, fueling her body without tasting anything. The cell block had its own rhythms. Footsteps in the corridor, doors opening and closing, voices raised and hushed. The architecture of incarceration playing its nightly symphony. She counted time by the shifts. Officers changed at 11. The overnight crew was smaller, more relaxed, less attentive. If someone wanted to do something off the record, late shift was the time to do it. 11:34 p.m. Heavy footsteps, deliberate, approaching. Serena opened her eyes but didn't move. Kept her breathing slow, pretended sleep. The footsteps stopped outside her cell. A key turned in the lock. The door opened. Vance Kelso stepped inside. He was alone. No partner, no witness, no camera visible in the corners of her cell. Can't sleep, she sat up slowly, kept her hands visible, made no sudden movements. Officer Kelso, it's inappropriate for male officers to enter holding cells occupied by female detainees without a female officer present. Who's going to report it? He moved further into the cell, let the door swing shut behind him. Not closed, but not open. You? The space between them shrank. 4 feet. 3. I know what you are. His voice was low, controlled. The voice of a man who believed he was in complete control of the situation. You're not a consultant. You're something else. And you've been watching us. Step back, officer. Or what? He took another step. Close enough now that she could see the sweat on his forehead, the pulse in his neck, the dilation of his pupils in the harsh fluorescent light. I'm going to say this once. Her voice didn't waver, didn't rise, didn't carry any emotion that he could use against her. Whatever you think you're going to do here, reconsider. There are cameras in this corridor. There are other detainees who can hear us. And when this is over, and it will be over, everything you do will be documented. He laughed, short, ugly, the laugh of a man who had heard threats before and watched them evaporate. You think documentation matters? You think anyone's going to listen to you over a decorated officer with 15 years on the force? I think you'd be surprised what matters when the right people start asking questions. Something shifted in his expression. Not fear, not quite, but uncertainty, the first crack in his confidence. He reached for her. She moved. 12 years of training compressed into a single second. She didn't strike him. That would give them the assault charge they were looking for. Instead, she redirected. His hand grasped empty air where her shoulder had been. His momentum carried him forward, off balance, and she was on her feet, back to the wall, putting the narrow cell between them. "Don't touch me." 3 words, flat, final. The voice of someone who had said those words before, in worse places than this, to more dangerous people than him. Kelso recovered his balance. His face flushed with embarrassment and something darker, the wounded pride of a predator who had misjudged his prey. "This isn't over." "No, it isn't." He stared at her for 5 seconds. 10. Then he turned and left, the cell door clanging shut behind him, the lock engaging with a sound like a gunshot. Serena stood in the silence, counted her heartbeat. 94. Higher than normal, but controlled, contained. She wasn't scared. She was angry. And anger, unlike fear, could be useful. The GPS tracker required a specific pressure sequence to activate. She waited until the corridor was quiet, until the footsteps had faded and the night shift had settled into their routines. Then she sat on the edge of the bunk, crossed her right ankle over her left knee, and pressed her thumb against a specific point on the inner sole of her shoe. 1 second, 2, 3. The tracker was designed to be invisible to standard searches. No metal components large enough to trigger detectors, no electronic signature when dormant. Just a sliver of circuitry embedded in the heel, waiting for the right touch. The pressure pattern was unique to each agent. Her handler had chosen a sequence that could be performed naturally without drawing attention. 3 short presses, 1 long, 2 short. The rhythm of a nervous habit if anyone happened to be watching. She completed the sequence and felt nothing. No vibration. No confirmation. The tracker was designed to be silent, undetectable even to the person activating it. But somewhere in Phoenix, or maybe Tucson or Washington, a monitoring station was now receiving a signal. Her location, her status, the timestamp of activation. Help was coming. She just had to survive long enough to receive it. Morning arrived without fanfare. Gray light filtered through windows somewhere beyond her cell. Footsteps increased in the corridor. The mechanical hum of the building intensified as day shift arrived. Serena hadn't slept. Couldn't sleep. Not after Kelso's visit. Not with the adrenaline still circulating through her bloodstream. At 7:15, an officer brought breakfast. Different face. Badge 7234. Nameplate, Reyes. Female, early 30s, professional demeanor. Morning. Oatmeal or eggs? Eggs. The exchange was almost normal. Almost human. The first moment of basic decency since her arrest. Reyes paused at the cell door after delivering the tray. Something in her expression, not sympathy exactly, but acknowledgement. The look of someone who saw things they didn't approve of, but couldn't change. "You okay?" "I've been better." Reyes nodded once, then left. No follow-up. No offer of help. Just that moment of recognition, shared between 2 women who understood what it meant to exist in spaces that weren't designed for them. At 9 a.m., the cell door opened again. The man who entered was different from the others. Suit, not uniform. Badge on a lanyard, but the design was different. Older, 50-year, gray hair cut short, face lined with experience and something that might have been weariness. "Ms. Langford, I'm Investigator Raymond Vega, Internal Affairs Division." Internal Affairs, the police who police the police. The last line of defense against the kind of corruption that had put her in this cell, or the first line of cover-up, depending on whose pocket Vega was in. Internal Affairs wasn't mentioned before. "I was assigned this morning." Vega pulled the chair into the same position Frost had used, close, face to face, but his posture was different, open, less aggressive. Certain irregularities came to attention. "What irregularities?" "Your arrest report doesn't add up. Suspicious activity charges require specific documented behavior. The report references loitering and surveillance equipment, but doesn't establish how either constitutes a crime under Arizona statutes." He was reading from a file. Her file. But he was reading it critically, not as a prosecutor building a case, but as an investigator looking for holes. "My arresting officers seem confident in their interpretation of the law." Officers sometimes are. Vega closed the file. "I've been doing this for 22 years, Ms. Langford. I've learned to tell the difference between a legitimate stop and something else. And what does this look like to you? Something else. He met her eyes directly. Would you like to file a formal complaint, or would you like to escalate this through federal channels? The last two words hung in the air. Federal channels, not a phrase internal affairs investigators typically offered to random detainees. Why would federal channels be relevant? They might not be. Vega's expression didn't change. But if they were, the offer would stand. He was probing, testing, trying to determine if she was what he suspected she might be, or if she was simply a well-informed civilian who had been caught in something bigger than herself. I'll keep that in mind. Please do. He placed a business card on the bench beside her. Plain white, minimal text, Raymond Vega, Investigator, Professional Standards Bureau. If anything changes, call that number. He left without another word. Serena picked up the card, memorized the number, then slid it into the waistband of her pants, where a quick pat-down wouldn't find it. Allies were rare in places like this, but they weren't impossible. If you want to see justice served, hit that like button and subscribe. The FBI raid that's coming next will shake you to your core. At 4 p.m., a guard arrived with paperwork. Your belongings. Check the inventory and sign. Serena read the form carefully. Wallet, keys, phone, notebook, pen, 5 items. The original inventory had listed 6. The recording device isn't on this list. Held as evidence pending investigation. Under what case number? The guard flipped through her papers, searched, came up empty. Case number. Pending assignment. Pending. Meaning no case had been filed. No evidence log created. No chain of custody established. They had stolen her property and hadn't even bothered to document the theft. I want a receipt for the held item, with case number when assigned, and your badge number for the record. The guard hesitated, not used to detainees who knew their rights, who documented, who pushed back. Fine. She scribbled the information on a scrap of paper. Martinez, J badge 5847. Happy now? Thrilled. At 5 p.m., 25 hours after her arrest, Serena Langford walked out of Precinct 4 and into the blast furnace of Phoenix afternoon. No car. It had been towed for investigation. No phone, battery dead, charger confiscated. No money, her $47 had been lost somewhere between booking and release. Just the clothes on her back, a dead phone, and a business card hidden in her waistband. She stood on the sidewalk and let the sun bake the prison smell out of her clothes. Breathed air that didn't taste like concrete and disinfectant. Felt the ground solid beneath her feet. Free, for now. But they still had her recording device. Still had 6 months of evidence that could bring down an entire corruption network or disappear it forever. And somewhere in that building, people were deciding what to do about the woman who had been watching them. She started walking. No destination in mind. Just movement. Just distance between herself and the place that had held her. 3 blocks away, a black SUV pulled up beside her. Federal plates, tinted windows. The rear door opened. A man's voice from inside. Agent Langford, please get in. She recognized the voice. SAC, Marcus Holloway, her handler's handler. The man who had authorized Operation Desert Glass 18 months ago. She got in. The SUV was cool, dark, quiet. Climate control humming at a comfortable 68 degrees. Holloway sat in the back seat, laptop open, phone in hand, the picture of federal efficiency. Agent Langford, you had us worried. The signal took longer to reach monitoring than expected. GPS tracker had interference. Building construction. Took 14 hours to triangulate your exact location. 14 hours. Long enough for anything to happen. Long enough for accidents in custody. Long enough for evidence to vanish. But she was here. Alive. Intact. What's the status of Operation Desert Glass? Intact, for now. Holloway closed his laptop. But your cover is blown. The tip they mentioned? It came from inside. Someone in the network identified you and decided to burn you. Do we know who? Not yet. We're working on it. He handed her a new phone. Encrypted. Fully charged. In the meantime, you're off active duty. Go home. Rest. Wait for further instructions. They still have my recording device. 6 months of audio evidence. I know. We're working on that too. Working on it how? That device contains direct evidence of conversations between Shaw, Frost, and Novak. Without it, I know what it contains, Agent Langford. Holloway's voice sharpened. and I know what's at stake. But we can't exactly walk into Precinct 4 and demand they return stolen property, not without tipping our hand. So we let them destroy it? We let them think they've destroyed it. For the first time, Holloway smiled. The device has a backup transmission protocol. 30-second bursts, encrypted, routed through a series of international servers. Every audio file it recorded has already been uploaded to our secure servers. What they have is hardware. What we have is evidence. Relief flooded through her. Not visible, not expressed, just a loosening of tension she hadn't realized she'd been carrying. They don't know that. They don't know a lot of things. Holloway's smile faded. But they know you were watching them, and they know you're still alive, which makes you a liability. A liability they'll try to eliminate? A liability they'll try to discredit. Kelso's already filed a report claiming you assaulted him during booking. Shaw's written a supplemental alleging you made threatening statements. By tomorrow, they'll have built a paper trail that makes you look like a violent criminal who got exactly what she deserved. The irony was bitter. She had spent 6 months building a case against them. Now they were building a case against her. What do? We wait. We watch. We let them think they've won. Holloway handed her a second item, a manila folder thick with documents. And when the time is right, we bring the whole thing down. She opened the folder. Inside, arrest warrants, search warrants, subpoenas, all pre-signed, all waiting for the right moment. When? Soon. 48 hours, maybe 72. We need to identify the leak first. Make sure the next move isn't compromised like this one was. 48 hours, 72. Time that felt like an eternity when you knew people were hunting you. But she had survived worse, had waited longer, had endured more. She closed the folder and looked out the window at Phoenix streaming past. The city that had almost swallowed her. The city she was about to help tear apart. I'll be ready. The SUV dropped her at a safe house in Scottsdale. Anonymous condo in a complex full of anonymous condos. The kind of place where no one asked questions and everyone minded their own business. She showered, changed into fresh clothes from a go-bag that had been waiting for her, ate food that someone had stocked in the refrigerator, performed the rituals of normal life like a ghost, remembering what it meant to be human. At 11 p.m., her new phone buzzed. Text message from an unlisted number. You got lucky in Phoenix. Tucson won't be as forgiving. 7 words, no signature, no context. Serena read the message twice. Screenshot. Forward to the secure FBI server. Then she set the phone down and stared at the ceiling. They knew where she was. Knew she was still active. Knew she was coming for them. Good. Let them know. Because she wasn't running. Wasn't hiding. Wasn't going to disappear into witness protection and let them win. She was going to finish what she started, even if it killed her. Especially if it killed her. 2 days later, the warrants dropped. 3 black SUVs pulled up to Precinct 4 at 8 a.m. sharp. Federal plates, FBI windbreakers, 12 agents with weapons and paperwork, and the full authority of the United States Department of Justice behind them. Serena Langford stepped out of the lead vehicle, wearing her badge for the first time in 6 months. The front doors of the precinct opened. Officers emerged, curious, confused, alarmed. And in the lobby, frozen mid-step with a coffee cup in his hand, stood Vance Kelso. Their eyes met. His face went white. Officer Vance Kelso, badge 4471. Her voice carried across the lobby, clear and strong. You're being detained pending federal investigation into civil rights violations under 18 U.S.C. Section 242. Deprivation of rights under color of law. She read him his rights. The same rights he had never read to her. And as the handcuffs clicked around his wrists, 1, 2, 3, she counted each sound like a hymn of justice finally being sung. But even as they led him away, she knew this wasn't the end. Somewhere in this building, evidence was being destroyed. Somewhere, phones were ringing. Somewhere, the network was trying to protect itself. And the person who had burned her, the leak, the traitor, the shadow, was still out there, watching, waiting. The lobby of Precinct 4 had never been this quiet. 12 FBI agents spread through the space like a tide of dark blue windbreakers, each one moving with the precision of people who had rehearsed this moment 100 times. Badge numbers were being photographed. Computers were being seized. Filing cabinets were being tagged with yellow evidence tape. And in the center of it all, Vance Kelso stood with his hands cuffed behind his back, staring at Serena Langford like he was seeing a ghost. Which, in a way, he was. This is a mistake. His voice had lost its swagger. The predator from the holding cell was gone, replaced by something smaller, weaker, caught. I don't know who you think you are, but I know exactly who I am. Serena held up her credentials. FBI badge, gold shield, her photograph and name printed on laminated plastic that carried the weight of the entire federal government. Supervisory Special Agent Serena Langford, FBI Public Corruption Unit. And I know exactly who you are, Officer Kelso. I've spent 6 months learning everything about you. She let that sink in. 6 months. Every shift, every stop, every complaint that had been buried, and every victim who had been silenced. You can't do this. Kelso's voice cracked. You were a suspect. You were in custody. This is entrapment. Entrapment requires inducement to commit a crime you wouldn't otherwise commit. She stepped closer, close enough that only he could hear her next words. I didn't induce anything. I just watched and documented and waited for you to show me exactly who you are. An agent took Kelso by the arm, guiding him toward the exit. He went without resistance, too stunned to fight, too scared to run. 1 down, 4 to go. The second arrest happened in the hallway outside the detective bullpen. Miranda Shaw had been heading toward her office when the agents intercepted her. She saw them coming, saw the windbreakers and the weapons and the warrant folders. And for one brief moment, something like calculation flickered across her face. Then the mask slammed down. Professional, composed. The sergeant who had spent 20 years learning to control every situation she entered. I assume you have documentation for this intrusion. S.A.C. Holloway stepped forward. He was taller than Shaw, broader, and he carried himself with the quiet authority of someone who had nothing to prove. Sergeant Miranda Shaw, badge 2289. Federal warrant for your arrest on charges of conspiracy to deprive civil rights under 18 U.S.C. Section 241 and obstruction of justice under Section 1519. Those are serious allegations. Shaw's voice didn't waver. I'll need to see the warrant. Holloway handed it to her. She read it slowly, carefully, looking for any flaw in the paperwork that might give her leverage later. She didn't find one. This is retaliation. She handed the warrant back. That woman was a suspect in an ongoing investigation. She was surveilling my officers. She was carrying government-grade surveillance equipment without authorization. The authorization was mine. Serena moved to stand beside Holloway. Operation Desert Glass. 18 months of investigation into public corruption within Phoenix Metro PD. Your unit was the primary target, and you, Sergeant Shaw, are the reason we're here. For the first time, something cracked in Shaw's composure. Not fear, not exactly, but recognition, the dawning awareness that everything she had built, the network, the protection, the power, was crumbling around her. You have the right to remain silent. The agent reading the rights spoke in a monotone, reciting words that had been said 1,000,000 times before. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. Shaw said nothing, just held out her wrists for the handcuffs and walked toward the exit with the dignity of a queen being led to the guillotine. 2 down. Detective Corbin Frost was harder to find. He wasn't in the bullpen, wasn't in the break room, wasn't in any of the places where a cybercrimes detective might reasonably be expected to be at 8:15 on a Tuesday morning. Serena knew where he was before the search team reported it. He's in the server room. She ran. Through corridors she had memorized from blueprints. Past offices where officers stood frozen, watching the federal invasion like witnesses to a natural disaster. Down a stairwell to the basement level, where the precinct's digital infrastructure hummed behind locked doors. The server room door was closed, locked from inside. Through the small window, she could see him. Frost, hunched over a terminal, fingers flying across the keyboard, deleting files as fast as the system would allow. Federal agents, open this door. No response. Just the continued click of keys. The desperate rhythm of a man trying to destroy evidence before it could destroy him. Breach it! The agent beside her, a woman named Torres, former Marine, built like a linebacker, didn't hesitate. One kick. The lock shattered. The door swung open. Frost looked up. His face was pale, sweating, the face of a man who knew he was caught but couldn't stop trying to escape. Step away from the computer. I'm just running maintenance. Step away, now. He stepped away, slowly, hands raised, eyes darting toward the terminal, calculating whether he had deleted enough, whether the evidence was truly gone. Detective Corbin Frost, you're under arrest for obstruction of justice under 18 U.S.C. Section 1519 and destruction of federal evidence under Section 1001. Torres moved forward, cuffs ready. You have the right to remain silent. This is a mistake. Frost's voice was a lawyer's voice now, already building the defense. Whatever files you think I was deleting, they were routine maintenance logs, nothing relevant to any investigation. We'll let our forensics team make that determination. Serena nodded to the tech agents already moving toward the terminal. Everything he touched, everything connected to this network, full image of every drive. You can't access department records without a warrant? She held up the document. Warrant covers precinct-wide communications, evidence storage, and personal devices of all named individuals. Your name is on page 7. Would you like to read it? Frost's jaw tightened. He knew. They all knew. The legal arguments that might have worked against local prosecutors would shatter against federal authority like glass against stone. I want my attorney. You'll get one, after booking. 3 down. Lieutenant Jasper Novak made the arrest even easier. He was in his office when they found him. Not at his computer, not destroying evidence, just sitting behind his desk with his hands folded and a look of absolute calm on his face. Agent Langford. He smiled when she entered. The same warm smile he had used in the interrogation room. The same false friendliness that had offered her a deal in exchange for information. I wondered when you'd get around to me. Lieutenant Novak, you're under arrest. I know. He stood before she could finish. Extended his wrists. I assume you found the files I left for you. Serena paused. This wasn't how suspects behaved. Not the guilty ones. Not the ones with something to hide. What files? On the shared drive. Folder labeled insurance. I've been building it for 3 years. His smile widened. You didn't think you were the only one watching, did you? Holloway appeared in the doorway. Agent Langford, we need to talk. She looked at Novak. Looked at Holloway. Something was happening here that she didn't understand yet. Cuff him. Hold him in interview 1. She followed Holloway into the corridor. What's going on? Novak's been cooperating with us for the past 18 months. The words didn't make sense. Novak was on the target list. His name was in the warrants. He had been identified as part of the corruption network. He's a confidential informant, has been since before Operation Desert Glass launched. Holloway's voice was low, meant only for her. The files in that folder contain everything we need to bring down Holt. Bank records, wire transfers, recordings of conversations where Holt explicitly discusses payoffs. Why wasn't I told? Need to know. Your cover was too valuable to risk. If you had treated Novak differently than the others, it might have tipped them off. Serena felt the ground shift beneath her. 6 months embedded, 6 months watching, documenting, risking her life, and she had been part of a larger operation within the operation. So the deal he offered me in the holding cell was real. He was trying to determine if you were who he suspected you were without breaking his own cover. Holloway glanced back toward Novak's office. He's not a saint. He's done things that will probably cost him his badge, but he's also the reason we have enough evidence to take down a deputy chief. And the leak? The tip that burned me? Not Novak, someone else. Someone we haven't identified yet. Another layer of the puzzle. Another shadow in a building full of them. What happens to him now? Protective custody until trial. He'll testify against Holt in exchange for immunity on lesser charges. Holloway paused. I know it's not satisfying. The system rarely is. But he gave us what we needed to finish this. Serena looked back at the office where Novak sat waiting. The man who had terrified her in that holding cell. The man who had threatened her with endless detention. The man who had been on her side all along. The system was never simple. Justice was never clean. But it was still justice. Partial. Imperfect. Better than nothing. Where's Holt? On his way. We called him at home. Told him there was an emergency at the precinct. Holloway checked his watch. He should be here in 10 minutes. I want to be there when he arrives. I wouldn't have it any other way. Deputy Chief Grayson Holt drove a Mercedes, silver, current model. The kind of car that cost more than a deputy chief's annual salary should allow. He parked in his reserved spot at 8:42 a.m., still adjusting his tie as he stepped out of the vehicle. His uniform was pressed. His shoes were polished. His bearing was that of a man who had spent 30 years climbing the ranks and expected another 10 years of comfortable authority before retirement. He didn't notice the federal vehicles until he was halfway to the front door. Then he stopped, looked, counted, 3 SUVs, 6 sedans, agents moving in and out of his precinct like they owned the place. Serena watched from the lobby window as understanding dawned on his face. The calculation, the assessment, the moment when 30 years of instinct told him to run and 30 years of arrogance told him he could still talk his way out of this. Arrogance won. He walked through the front door with his head high and his shoulders back, the picture of command authority entering his own domain. "What the hell is going on in my precinct?" Holloway met him in the lobby. "Deputy Chief Holt, I'm SAC Marcus Holloway, FBI Public Corruption Unit. We're executing federal warrants as part of Operation Desert Glass." Holt's face went through stages, confusion first, then recognition. The name of the operation he had been told about 18 months ago. The investigation he had been assured was focused elsewhere. Then something darker. Calculation. Desert Glass. That's been running for 18 months? Correct. And Agent Langford has been embedded in your jurisdiction for the past 6. Holt turned. Saw Serena. Stared. "You." His voice was flat, controlled, but his eyes were wild. "You were in my holding cell. You were the financial consultant you arrested without cause?" "Yes." She stepped forward, badge visible, authority clear. "Also supervisory special agent, FBI Public Corruption Unit, and everything you and your officers did to me is documented. I didn't do anything to you. You extended my detention. You denied me legal counsel. You allowed your officers to threaten and intimidate me, and you have spent the past 30 years protecting a network of corruption that has violated the rights of hundreds of citizens in Maricopa County." "That's a lie." "Is it?" Serena pulled a document from her folder, read aloud. "Wire transfer, December 12, 2023. $47,000 from Southwestern Holdings, LLC, to a trust account registered to G. Holt. Southwestern Holdings is a shell corporation owned by Victor Molina, currently under federal indictment for drug trafficking. Would you like me to continue?" Silence. The lobby had gone still. Officers, agents, administrative staff, everyone watching, listening, witnessing the fall of a man who had seemed untouchable. "I want my attorney." "You'll get one. But first," Holloway stepped forward. "Deputy Chief Holt, you're not under arrest at this time. However, you are placed on administrative leave effective immediately, pending internal affairs investigation and federal review. Your department-issued weapon and badge, please." Holt didn't move. His hands hung at his sides, clenched into fists. The veins in his neck stood out like cables. "You can't do this." "I just did." Holloway extended his hand. "Weapon and badge, now, or I'll add resisting federal authority to the list of things we're investigating. If this satisfying already, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. The courtroom showdown coming next will leave you breathless. 10 seconds, 20, the longest half-minute of Serena's life. Then Holt reached for his belt, unholstered his weapon, handed it over grip first, unclipped his badge, placed it in Holloway's palm. 30 years, decorations, service awards, the respect of an entire department, all stripped away in one moment. "This isn't over." His voice was quiet, dangerous, the voice of a man who had been humiliated and would spend the rest of his life seeking revenge. "No." Serena met his eyes. "It isn't." The search of Precinct 4 took 11 hours. Agents cataloged evidence from 17 offices, seized 43 computers and 112 cell phones, collected paper records from filing cabinets that hadn't been opened in years, tagged and bagged physical evidence ranging from cash hidden in desk drawers to drugs stored in evidence lockers that had never been logged. Serena spent most of those hours in a conference room that had been converted into a command center. Maps on the walls, timelines on whiteboards, the architecture of corruption laid bare in charts and graphs and connecting lines. "Kelso is talking." Torres entered with a tablet displaying interview notes. "Not confessing, but talking. He's throwing Shaw under the bus. Says she orchestrated the stop on you, that he was just following orders." "Does he have proof?" "He has the email she sent him. Target confirmed at Federal Garage. Proceed with contact. She thought she deleted it from the server, but our forensics team recovered it from a backup." The email. Serena remembered it from Holt's confrontation with her in the holding cell. Evidence that her stop wasn't random. Evidence that someone had known she would be there. Where did Shaw get the tip? That's where it gets interesting. Torres pulled up a second document. The email was forwarded to Shaw from another address, but that address has been scrubbed. Completely. Professionally. Scrubbed how? The kind of scrubbing that requires access to the server infrastructure. Someone with high-level IT permissions deleted all traces of the original sender. We're talking admin-level access, the kind that only a handful of people in the department would have. Frost. It had to be Frost. He was cybercrimes. He would have the access. What about Frost's interview? He's lawyered up. Won't say a word without his attorney present. But here's the thing. Torres swiped to a new screen. The deletion of that email happened at 3:17 a.m. last night. Frost was in booking until 4. He couldn't have done it. Someone else. Someone with admin access. Someone who was still in the building when the rest of the network was being arrested. Who else has that level of access? Officially, 4 people. Chief of Police, who's been on vacation in Hawaii for the past week. Deputy Chief Holt, who was at home. IT Director Ramon Garza, who's been on medical leave since January, and… Torres paused, something in her expression that Serena couldn't read. And a civilian contractor named Kevin Wu. He was brought in 6 months ago to upgrade the precinct's cybersecurity systems. 6 months ago, the same time Serena had been embedded. Where is Wu now? That's the problem. Torres set the tablet down. He didn't come to work today. His apartment is empty, his phone is disconnected, his car is still in the parking lot, but he's gone. Gone. Vanished. The leak had identified himself by running. Put out a BOLO, contact TSA, Customs, Border Patrol. If he's trying to leave the country, already done. Holloway ordered it an hour ago. Torres hesitated. There's something else you should know. What? Wu's contract was approved by Deputy Chief Holt, but the original recommendation came from outside the department, a consulting firm called Southwestern Security Solutions. Southwestern. The same shell corporation network that had been funneling money to Holt. The corruption was deeper than they had mapped, wider than they had imagined, and at least one piece of it was still out there, running, trying to escape before the net closed. Find him. Serena's voice was harder than she intended. Whatever it takes, find him. Night fell over Phoenix. The search wound down. Evidence was transported to the FBI field office in unmarked vans. Officers who had watched their colleagues get arrested stood in small groups, whispering, wondering who would be next. Serena sat in the conference room alone, surrounded by the debris of a successful operation. Coffee cups, warrant copies, photographs of people she had spent 6 months learning to hate. Her phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. You missed one. 3 words, no signature, no context. She stared at the screen, felt the cold weight of warning settle into her stomach. Wu was the leak. Wu had scrubbed the email. Wu had disappeared before the raid, but Wu was a technician, a contractor. He didn't have the authority or the knowledge to run an operation like this. Someone had hired him. Someone had directed him. Someone was still out there, watching the investigation collapse around them and planning their next move. She typed back, "Who?" No response. The message remained delivered but unread. Somewhere in the city, a shadow was watching, and she had no idea who it was. 3 months later, Phoenix City Hall occupied a block of downtown real estate that had been renovated so many times it had lost any coherent architectural identity. The council chambers on the 3rd floor were wood-paneled and high-ceilinged, designed to project authority and permanence. Today, they projected something else. Tension, anticipation, the electric awareness that history was being made. Serena sat at the witness table, badge visible, folder of evidence in front of her. The administrative hearing had been scheduled for 9 a.m. It was now 11:45, and the panel had spent nearly 3 hours reviewing testimony. The panel itself was a compromise. 2 city officials, both appointed by the mayor, 1 civilian oversight representative, elected by community groups, 1 DOJ observer, present to ensure federal interests were protected, and 1 retired judge, brought in to lend the proceedings an air of impartiality. Agent Langford, the hearing chair, a white-haired woman named Patricia Okonkwo, the civilian representative, leaned forward. Please summarize the violations documented during your detention. Serena opened her folder. She had given this testimony before, in depositions and pre-hearing interviews, but this was the official record. This was what would be preserved. Between 2:47 p.m. on March 15th and 5 p.m. on March 16th, 2024, I documented 17 procedural violations, 4 instances of rights denial, 3 attempts at evidence destruction, and 1 incident of threatening behavior by Officer Kelso. She detailed each one: the lack of probable cause, the failure to read Miranda rights, the denial of phone access, the illegally tight handcuffs, the confiscation of property without documentation, the late-night cell visit, the 12 minutes of malfunctioning body cam footage. Each violation was a brick in a wall. Each piece of evidence was mortar holding the bricks together. By the time she finished, the wall was insurmountable. Thank you, Agent Langford. Okonkwo made notes on her tablet. The panel will now deliberate. Serena returned to her seat in the gallery. Around her, lawyers whispered to clients. Journalists typed on laptops. Family members of previous victims sat in rows, watching, waiting, hoping. The deliberation took 4 hours. The panel has reached its determinations. The room fell silent. Every head turned toward the raised platform where the 5 panelists sat. Okonkwo read from a prepared statement, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's sound system. In the matter of Officer Vance Kelso, Badge 4471, the panel finds sufficient evidence of civil rights violations, excessive force, and conduct unbecoming an officer. Recommendation, termination, effective immediately. Additionally, the panel refers this matter to the U.S. Attorney's Office for Potential Criminal Prosecution under 18 U.S.C. Section 242. Kelso wasn't present. He had been in federal custody since the raid, denied bail due to flight risk. But his attorney was there, and she was already scribbling notes for what would undoubtedly be a lengthy appeals process. In the matter of Sergeant Miranda Shaw, Badge 2289, the panel finds sufficient evidence of conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and supervisory misconduct. Recommendation: suspension without pay, indefinite, pending resolution of federal criminal proceedings. If acquitted of criminal charges, demotion to patrol officer with 5-year probationary period. Shaw's attorney stood. The sergeant reserves all rights to appeal this determination. Appeals may be filed through proper channels. Okonkwo didn't look up. In the matter of Detective Corbin Frost, the panel notes that federal prosecution is pending and declines to issue administrative recommendations at this time. The matter will be revisited following resolution of criminal proceedings. Frost's lawyer nodded. He had expected this. The criminal case would take precedence. Administrative punishment would follow later. In the matter of Lieutenant Jasper Novak, the panel acknowledges the lieutenant's cooperation with federal authorities and the immunity agreement currently in place. No administrative action is recommended at this time. However, the panel notes that the lieutenant's conduct prior to his cooperation included multiple violations of department policy and recommends that any future employment in law enforcement be contingent on successful completion of ethics retraining. Novak wasn't present either. He was in witness protection somewhere in the Southwest, waiting to testify at trials that might not happen for another year. Finally, in the matter of Deputy Chief Grayson Holt, the room tensed. This was the one everyone had been waiting for. The panel finds substantial evidence of financial impropriety, abuse of authority, and failure to supervise subordinates. However, due to the complexity of federal criminal proceedings and ongoing investigation, the panel declines to recommend termination at this time. Murmurs rippled through the gallery. Serena felt her jaw tighten. Instead, the panel recommends permanent administrative leave with 30% pension reduction, pending final disposition of all related criminal matters. Deputy Chief Holt is prohibited from entering any Phoenix Metro PD facility, from contacting any current department employee, and from engaging in any law enforcement activity in the state of Arizona. Not termination, not criminal referral, just administrative leave and a pension cut. 30 years of corruption, hundreds of victims, millions of dollars stolen, and the worst he faced from the city was forced retirement with reduced benefits. Additionally, Okonkwo paused, ensuring she had the room's attention. The panel recommends that the City of Phoenix enter into immediate negotiations with the Department of Justice regarding a consent decree covering Precinct 4 operations. This decree should include mandatory policy reforms, external oversight, and ongoing federal monitoring for a period of no less than 18 months. The consent decree. That was the real victory. Not the individual punishments. Those were always incomplete, always compromised by politics and legal maneuvering. But the decree would force systemic change, would require new policies, new training, new accountability structures. It wasn't justice, not completely, but it was progress. And progress, in a system designed to resist change, was sometimes the best you could hope for. The press conference happened on the City Hall steps. Mayor Thompson stood at a podium bristling with microphones, flanked by the police chief and a DOJ representative. His prepared statement was carefully balanced, acknowledging problems while defending the majority of officers, promising reform while protecting institutional reputation. Serena watched from the back of the crowd. She had declined requests to speak. Her role was investigation, not publicity. Let the politicians handle the cameras. The City of Phoenix is committed to transparency and accountability, Thompson was saying. The actions of a few individuals do not represent the values of our police department or our community. A few individuals. As if corruption was a virus that had infected a handful of cells rather than a cancer that had metastasized through the entire system. But she didn't interrupt, didn't correct, didn't point out that a few individuals had operated for decades because many individuals had looked the other way. She had done her job. The rest was up to the system to fix. If it could. If it would. The coffee shop on Van Buren Street was quieter in the afternoon. Serena sat in her usual corner, back to the wall, eyes on the door. Some habits never changed. A young woman approached her table. Early 20s, nervous energy, hands clasped in front of her like she was holding something fragile. "Excuse me, are you Agent Langford, the one from the news?" Serena nodded. "I am. I wanted to thank you." The words came out in a rush, like she had been rehearsing them for days. "My brother was arrested by Kelso 2 years ago. They said he resisted. He didn't. He was just reaching for his wallet to show his ID. They broke his arm, fractured his eye socket. He still has trouble seeing out of his left eye." The weight of it settled over Serena like a shroud. She had read cases like this in the files, numbers and incident reports and medical records, but this was a face, a voice, a person carrying the scars of what had been done to her family. What happened to his case? Dismissed. Internal Affairs said there was no evidence of excessive force. The body camera footage was lost. Lost. The same word Kelso had used when 12 minutes of footage from Serena's detention disappeared. "What's your brother's name?" "Marcus. Marcus Chen." Serena pulled out her phone, made a note. "We're reviewing all cases involving the officers who were arrested. Your brother's case should be included. Give my office a call. I'll make sure someone follows up." The woman's eyes filled with tears. She blinked them back, nodded, turned to leave, then stopped. Does it ever change? Really change? Or does everything just go back to normal after the cameras leave? The question hung in the air. Honest. Painful. The question that everyone who had ever fought the system eventually asked. "I don't know." Serena's voice was quiet. "But I keep trying. Because the alternative is giving up. And I'm not ready to do that." The woman nodded again. Something had shifted in her expression. Not hope exactly, but maybe the seed of it. "Thank you." She left. Serena watched her go, then returned to her coffee, her thoughts, her never-ending catalog of things that needed to be done. The FBI field office in Phoenix occupied 3 floors of a glass tower in the financial district. Serena's desk was on the 7th floor, wedged between filing cabinets and a window that offered a view of mountains she never had time to look at. Her inbox held 63 unread emails. Her phone showed 12 missed calls. The stack of case files on her desk had grown by 3 inches since yesterday. "Agent Langford." Holloway appeared in her doorway. "Got a minute?" She followed him to his office. Larger desk, better view. The trappings of authority that came with 20 years of service and a spotless record. "We found Kevin Wu." Serena straightened. "Where?" "Taipei. He boarded a flight out of LAX the morning of the raid. Used a fake passport we traced back to a forgery operation in San Francisco." Holloway slid a photograph across his desk. Surveillance shot. Wu in an airport, baseball cap pulled low, face partially obscured. "Local authorities picked him up 6 hours ago. Extradition paperwork is already in process. Will he talk?" "His lawyer is negotiating immunity in exchange for information about who hired him." Holloway paused. "He's claiming he was just a contractor, that he didn't know the full scope of what he was involved in." "Do you believe him?" "I believe he knows more than he's saying. But without leverage, we can't force him to talk. And immunity is the only leverage his attorney will accept." The calculus was familiar. Frustrating. One more compromise in a system built on compromises. What about the original tip? The one that burned my cover? Still investigating. Wu claims he doesn't know who provided the initial information. Says he just received instructions through encrypted channels. "We're trying to trace the communications, but whoever set this up knew what they were doing." The shadow. Still out there. Still watching. "There's something else." Holloway's expression shifted. Something in it that Serena couldn't read. "We have a new assignment. Tucson. Similar pattern to Phoenix. Evidence tampering, civil rights violations, connections to organized crime." "When do I start?" "Monday. If you're ready." Ready. She was always ready. That was the job. That was the life she had chosen. "I'll be there." The apartment in Tempe was exactly as she had left it 3 months ago. Bed made with military corners. Closet arranged by color. Shoes lined up in rows. She had been living in safe houses and hotel rooms since the raid, never staying in one place long enough to unpack. But the hearing was over. The immediate threat was contained. She could come home. Home. The word felt strange. This apartment was a base of operations, not a sanctuary. A place to sleep and shower and store the few possessions she hadn't pawned for cover identities. She packed for Tucson. 3 days of clothes, 2 pairs of shoes, recording equipment, encrypted phone, the tools of her trade, portable and anonymous. At 11 p.m., her phone buzzed. Unknown number, text message. "You got lucky in Phoenix. Tucson won't be as forgiving." 7 words. The same message she had received 3 months ago. Different number, same shadow. Serena read it twice. Screenshot. Forward to the FBI secure server. Then she set the phone down and looked at the ceiling. They were watching her, following her, tracking her movements and anticipating her assignments before they were officially announced, which meant they had access to the Bureau's communications, to the case files, to information that should have been compartmentalized and secure. The leak wasn't just local, it was federal. She should have been scared, should have felt the cold grip of paranoia that came from knowing someone inside your own organization was working against you. Instead, she felt something else. Clarity, purpose, the sharp focus that came from understanding the true scope of the fight. They were watching her. Good. Let them watch. Because she was watching too. And she had just learned something valuable. The enemy wasn't just in Phoenix, wasn't just in Tucson. The enemy was everywhere, in every precinct, every office, every institution that had grown comfortable with corruption, and she wasn't going to stop until she had exposed every single one of them. The drive to Tucson took 2 hours. Serena left at 5 a.m., before the sun cleared the eastern mountains, before traffic clogged the interstate with commuters and trucks, and the daily machinery of commerce. The desert stretched on either side of the highway. Saguaros stood like sentinels against the lightening sky. Heat shimmered on the road ahead, creating mirages that vanished as she approached. Her new phone sat in the cup holder. Secure. Encrypted. A different number that no one outside the Bureau should know. It buzzed at 6:32. Unknown number. Text message. "We should talk." She didn't respond, didn't pull over, just kept driving, eyes on the road, mind calculating probabilities. The shadow was adapting, had obtained her new number within hours of it being assigned, was reaching out directly rather than just observing, which meant they wanted something, information maybe, or a deal, or simply to establish that they could reach her whenever they wanted. Her phone buzzed again. "I can help you find what you're looking for. Check the glove compartment." Serena's hands tightened on the wheel. The glove compartment. Someone had been in her car, recently, without triggering any of the security measures she had installed. Professional. Very professional. She pulled onto the shoulder, killed the engine. Sat in the silence of early morning desert, listening to her own heartbeat. The smart move was to call for backup, report the breach. Let someone else check for explosives or surveillance devices or whatever else might be waiting. But backup was an hour away, and whoever had left something in her car had done so knowing she would find it alone. She opened the glove compartment. Inside, a USB drive. Small, unbranded, exactly the kind of device that could contain anything. Evidence, malware, a tracking program, a message. She didn't plug it in. Wasn't that careless? Instead, she sealed it in an evidence bag from her kit and continued driving. Whatever was on that drive would be analyzed by Bureau technicians in a secure environment, and whoever had left it would learn that she couldn't be manipulated that easily. Her phone buzzed one final time. Smart, but eventually you'll have to look. And when you do, you'll understand. She didn't respond, just merged back onto the highway and drove toward Tucson, toward the next assignment, toward whatever waited in the shadows of another corrupt department. The sun rose behind her, painting the desert in shades of gold and red. Another day, another fight, and a USB drive in an evidence bag that might contain the key to everything, or nothing at all. The Tucson field office was smaller than Phoenix. 12 agents instead of 50, 1 floor instead of 3. But the work was the same. Corruption, cover-ups, the endless battle against people who believed the badge made them untouchable. Serena settled into her new desk, read the preliminary files, began building the mental map that would guide her investigation. The target was the Pima County Sheriff's Department, specifically a unit called the Border Enforcement Task Force. Drug seizures that disappeared, suspects who died in custody, a pattern of civil rights violations that stretched back at least 5 years. Different city, different names, same disease. Her phone buzzed. Not the shadow this time. Holloway. The USB drive was clean. No malware, no tracking software, just one file. What kind of file? Audio recording, 47 minutes. Appears to be a conversation between two people discussing Operation Desert Glass. One voice is definitely Shaw. The other... Holloway paused. We haven't been able to identify yet, but they reference things that only someone inside the Bureau would know. Case details, agent names, operational timelines. Inside the Bureau. The fear she had felt last night crystallized into something colder, harder. The shadow is federal. Possibly. Or someone with access to federal systems. We're expanding the investigation, bringing in counterintelligence. But for now, another pause. For now, trust no one outside this call. Report directly to me. Use only secure channels. Trust no one. The oldest advice in the intelligence world, and the hardest to follow when you needed allies to do the work. Understood. One more thing. The conversation on the recording references a meeting. Tomorrow night, Tucson, a restaurant called El Conquistador, 8 p.m. Are we surveilling? We're doing more than that. You're going in. If the shadow is there, we need to identify them. And you're the only agent they've shown any interest in contacting. Bait. She was being used as bait. I'll be ready. El Conquistador occupied a corner lot in downtown Tucson. Old building, renovated interior, the kind of upscale establishment where politicians and businessmen made deals over expensive steaks and imported wine. Serena arrived at 7:45. Black dress, low heels, minimal jewelry, the appearance of a woman meeting someone for dinner, not an FBI agent walking into a trap. The maitre d' led her to a corner table, reserved, a single rose in a vase, two menus already laid out. She sat with her back to the wall, watched the entrance, counted exits. 8 p.m. came and went. 8:15, 8:30. At 8:42, a man approached her table, 60 years old, silver hair, expensive suit. The bearing of someone who had spent decades wielding power and expected deference as his due. She didn't recognize him, but something in his face was familiar, something in the way he moved. Agent Langford, thank you for meeting me. I don't believe we've been introduced. He sat across from her, ordered wine without looking at the menu, waited for the sommelier to leave before speaking again. My name is Gerald Ashworth, retired FBI, Deputy Director of Operations from 2008 to 2018. Deputy Director. 3 levels above her own supervisor. The kind of rank that commanded attention and opened doors. You left quite a trail of breadcrumbs. I had to be sure you were the right person for this conversation. He sipped his wine. Operation Desert Glass was impressive, but Phoenix was just the surface. The network you uncovered, the corruption, the protection money, the drug connections, it's part of something much larger. How much larger? National. 17 states, hundreds of officers, millions of dollars flowing through channels we haven't even identified yet. Ashworth set down his glass. And at least 4 federal agents who are actively protecting it. 4. Inside the Bureau. Sabotaging investigations, leaking information, burning undercover operatives. Why tell me? Because you survived. Because you documented everything they did to you and didn't break. Because you're the kind of agent who doesn't give up, even when the system tells you to. He reached into his jacket, withdrew an envelope. Inside this is everything I've gathered over the past 5 years. Names, dates, account numbers. Enough to bring down the entire network, if you can find someone you trust to act on it. She didn't take the envelope. Not yet. Why not act on it yourself? You were deputy director. You had the authority. I tried. In 2017. 2 weeks later, I was diagnosed with a rare form of cancer, the kind that required immediate retirement and limited my life expectancy to months. His smile was bitter. Except the diagnosis was wrong. The tests were falsified. By the time I proved it, I was already out, and the people I had been investigating were untouchable. They had tried to kill him, or at least silence him. And they had succeeded, for a while. Why come forward now? Because I'm actually dying this time. Real diagnosis, real timeline. 6 months, maybe less. He pushed the envelope toward her. I don't have time to finish this myself, but you do, if you're willing. Serena looked at the envelope, looked at the man who had spent 5 years gathering evidence against his own organization, looked at the weight of what he was offering. Why me? You don't know me. I know your record. I know what you did in Phoenix. And I know that whoever is running this network is scared of you. That text message you received this morning? It came from inside the Bureau. They're trying to assess how much of a threat you are. And if I take this envelope, if I pursue this investigation, then you become a larger threat, and they will try to eliminate you. Bekirafort, Ashworth finished his wine. I won't lie to you, Agent Langford. This path leads to danger, isolation, the possibility that everything you've worked for will be destroyed. But it also leads to the truth, and in my experience, the truth is worth dying for. She thought about the past 6 months, the holding cell, the threats, the system closing around her like a fist. She had survived all of that, had turned their weapons against them and emerged stronger. But this was different. This was bigger. This was a war against an enemy that existed inside her own institution. How do I know I can trust you? You don't. Ashworth stood, left cash on the table for the wine. But you'll look at what's in that envelope, and once you see the evidence, you won't be able to walk away. He turned and left. Serena watched him go, then looked at the envelope still sitting on the table. The safe choice was to leave it there, report the meeting, let counterintelligence handle whatever conspiracy Ashworth was peddling. But safe choices had never been her specialty. She picked up the envelope, slipped it into her purse, and walked out into the Tucson night, carrying the weight of a secret that might get her killed. If you've made it this far, you're invested. Subscribe now and ring the bell, because the next story is even more explosive. 3 weeks later, the evidence in Ashworth's envelope had been verified, cross-referenced, analyzed by a team of 3 agents that Serena trusted enough to bring into the circle. It was everything he had promised: names of corrupt officials in 17 states, bank records showing payments from drug cartels, communications between federal agents and the people they were supposed to be investigating, and at the center of it all, a name: Raymond Calhoun, currently serving as Assistant Director of the FBI's Criminal Investigative Division. 3 levels above Serena, 2 levels below the director himself. The shadow had a face. "We can't move on this." Holloway's voice was strained. They were in a secure room in the Tucson field office, windows covered, phones confiscated, every precaution taken against surveillance. Calhoun has 30 years of service, a spotless record, and political connections that reach all the way to the White House. Without ironclad evidence, this is ironclad evidence. Serena tapped the stack of documents on the table. Wire transfers, encrypted communications, testimony from cooperating witnesses. It's circumstantial. A good lawyer would argue the bank records are misinterpreted. The communications could be coded to frame him. The witnesses are compromised by their own involvement. Holloway rubbed his temples. We need more. We need something that can't be explained away. What about Shaw? She made a deal to testify. If we can connect her directly to Calhoun, Shaw's dead. The words hung in the air, cold, final. What? Found this morning. Cell at the Federal Detention Center. Apparent suicide. Hanging. Holloway's voice was flat, professional, but his eyes told a different story. Except the camera in her cell malfunctioned 12 minutes before her death. Sound familiar? 12 minutes. The same gap as Kelso's body cam footage. The same pattern. They're cleaning house. They're protecting themselves. Shaw knew too much. Could connect Calhoun to Phoenix, so they eliminated her before she could testify. Holloway stood, began pacing. Frost is in protective custody, which means they can't reach him easily. But Novak? Is Novak safe? For now. We've moved him twice in the past week. New identity, new location, only 3 people know where he is. Holloway stopped. But if they found Shaw in federal custody, they can find anyone. The walls were closing in. Every lead they pursued seemed to create new dangers. Every step forward triggered reactions from enemies they couldn't see. What do? We go public. Serena's voice was steady. We take everything we have to the Inspector General, to Congress, to the press if we have to. Make it impossible to bury. And if Calhoun has allies in all those places, then at least the evidence is out. At least people know. And if something happens to us, the investigation continues. Holloway was silent for a long moment, the weight of the decision visible on his face. You understand what you're asking. Once we go public, there's no going back. Careers end, people get hurt. The Bureau's reputation is already compromised. By people like Calhoun. By 30 years of corruption that was allowed to fester because no one wanted to look. Serena met his eyes. We have a chance to cut it out, to actually change something. That's worth the cost. Is it worth dying for? She thought about Ashworth, about Shaw, about the shadow that had been watching her for months, waiting for the moment to strike. I don't know, but I'm willing to find out. 1 month later, the Senate Judiciary Committee hearing room was packed. Senators at the raised platform, lawyers at the side tables, journalists crowded into every available seat, cameras capturing every expression, every gesture, every word. Serena sat at the witness table, folder of evidence in front of her, badge visible on her lapel. Agent Langford. Senator Patricia Morrison, chair of the committee, leaned into her microphone. Please describe for the committee what you discovered during Operation Desert Glass and subsequent investigations. Serena began to speak. The story unfolded in careful, documented detail. Phoenix, the corruption network, the federal connections, Shaw's death, the pattern that stretched across 17 states. She didn't name Calhoun directly, couldn't without more evidence that would survive legal challenge, but she named the system that protected him, the culture that enabled him, the institutional failures that allowed corruption to flourish in the very agencies tasked with fighting it. The hearing lasted 4 days. By the end, 3 federal investigations had been launched. Calhoun had been placed on administrative leave, and the FBI director had announced a comprehensive review of the Criminal Investigative Division. Not justice, not yet, but the beginning of it. 6 months after Phoenix, Serena stood at the window of her new office in Washington. Different city, different role. Special advisor to the FBI Inspector General, tasked with overhauling internal oversight procedures. The view showed monuments and memorials, the architecture of democracy, the promise of justice that was always more complicated than it appeared. Her phone buzzed. Text message from an unknown number. "You won this round, but the game isn't over." She read the words, smiled, then typed back, "I know, neither am I." The shadow was still out there. The network was wounded, but not destroyed. The fight would continue. Different battles, different names, but the same war. She was ready. Epilogue. The coffee shop on Van Buren Street had new management, new furniture, new everything except the location and the memories. Serena sat in the back corner one final time, back to the wall, eyes on the door. The young woman from before, Marcus Chen's sister, slid into the seat across from her. "I wanted you to know. They reopened my brother's case, found the body cam footage that was supposed to be lost. Officer Kelso is being charged with aggravated assault and civil rights violations." Serena nodded. One case among hundreds. One victory in an ocean of defeats. "How's Marcus doing?" "Better. He's in physical therapy for the eye. Doctors say he might regain partial vision." The woman paused. "He wanted me to give you this." She placed an envelope on the table. Inside, a handwritten note. "Thank you for not giving up. Thank you for fighting when no one else would. I don't know if the system will ever really change, but knowing someone is trying makes it easier to hope." Serena read the note twice, folded it carefully, placed it in her pocket. "Tell him the fight isn't over." "I will." The woman stood, hesitated. "Do you ever get tired of all of this? Every day? Then why do you keep going?" Serena thought about the question, about 6 months embedded, about 25 hours in a holding cell, about Shaw and Kelso and Holt and the shadow that was still watching from somewhere in the darkness. Because someone has to, and because giving up means they win. She stood, gathered her things. "Tell Marcus that for every person who gives up, there's someone else who starts fighting. The numbers are changing, slowly, but they're changing." The woman nodded. Something in her expression had shifted. The seed of hope, maybe, growing into something stronger. "Thank you. Don't thank me. Join me." She walked out into the Phoenix afternoon. Sun blazing, heat shimmering, the city that had almost broken her, now just another point on a map of battles fought and won. Her phone buzzed. Holloway. "We found the leak. One of Calhoun's people. He's talking." "What's he saying?" "Everything. Names, dates, bank accounts. The whole network is about to collapse." Serena closed her eyes, let the sun warm her face. "I'm on my way." She walked toward her car, toward the next fight, toward a future that was uncertain but not hopeless. The shadow was fading, the light was spreading, and somewhere in America, someone else was waking up to the truth, that the badge didn't make you untouchable, that the system could be changed, and that justice, however delayed, was still possible. One case at a time, one victory at a time, one fighter at a time. The story wasn't over, but this chapter was, and it ended with something that had seemed impossible 6 months ago. Hope. 18 months after Phoenix, the federal courthouse in Washington, D.C., occupied a full block of Pennsylvania Avenue, its marble columns and bronze doors projecting the weight of American justice. Inside courtroom 4B, history was being made, quietly, methodically, one piece of evidence at a time. Serena Langford sat in the gallery, 3 rows behind the prosecution table. She wore civilian clothes today, Dark blazer, simple blouse, no badge visible. This wasn't her case anymore. She had built the foundation, gathered the evidence, survived the threats. Now it was time for the system to do what systems were supposed to do: deliver accountability. The United States calls Raymond Calhoun to the stand. The former assistant director of the FBI's Criminal Investigative Division rose from the defense table. 63 years old. Gray suit, red tie, the uniform of power he had worn for 3 decades. His face showed nothing. No fear, no remorse, no acknowledgement of what he had done. But his hands trembled slightly as he placed them on the Bible. "Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?" "I do." The words echoed in the silent courtroom. Serena watched him take the witness stand, watched him arrange himself in the chair with the practiced ease of someone who had testified hundreds of times before. But never like this. Never as the accused. Assistant U.S. Attorney Diana Reeves approached the podium. Young for this assignment, 38, barely a decade out of law school, but sharp, relentless, the kind of prosecutor who treated every case like a personal crusade. "Mr. Calhoun, you served as Assistant Director of the FBI's Criminal Investigative Division from 2019 until your suspension 14 months ago. Is that correct?" "It is." "During that time, you had oversight responsibility for multiple field offices, including Phoenix, Tucson, and El Paso?" "Among others, yes." "And you had access to sensitive operational information, including the identities of undercover agents and confidential informants?" Calhoun's attorney, a silver-haired man named Preston Webb, who charged $800 an hour, rose from his seat. "Objection, relevance. My client's job responsibilities are not in dispute. Goes to opportunity, Your Honor." Reeves didn't look at Webb. The defendant had unique access to the information that was leaked. Judge Harold Okonkwo, no relation to the Phoenix hearing chair, despite the shared surname, considered for a moment. "Overruled. The witness will answer." Calhoun's expression didn't change. "Yes, I had access to that information." "Including information about Operation Desert Glass?" "Yes." "Including the identity of Special Agent Serena Langford, who was embedded undercover in Phoenix Metro PD's Precinct 4? A pause, almost imperceptible, but Serena caught it. "I was aware of the operation. I don't recall specific details about individual agents." "You don't recall?" Reeves pulled a document from her folder. "Let me refresh your memory. Government Exhibit 147, an email from your personal account to an address later traced to Kevin Wu, the IT contractor who disappeared the morning of the Phoenix raid. The email reads, and I quote, "Asset identified. Federal Garage, Level B1. Proceed with contact protocol." Do you recognize this email? "I do not." "It was sent from your personal email address, your personal device, using your personal password. My accounts may have been compromised. I've reported the possibility to the Bureau's Cybersecurity Division." "Interesting." Reeves set the document down. "Because the Cybersecurity Division's forensic analysis, Government Exhibit 203, confirms that the email was sent from a device registered to you, from an IP address corresponding to your home in McLean, Virginia, at a time when cell tower records place your personal phone at that same location." Webb rose again. "Objection. The forensic analysis has been challenged, and the challenge was rejected by this court 2 weeks ago." Reeves turned to the judge. "Your Honor, I move to admit Exhibits 147 and 203. Admitted. The documents went into the record. Another brick in the wall. Another piece of evidence that couldn't be explained away. Serena watched Calhoun's face, still controlled, still projecting confidence. But something had shifted in his eyes, the first crack in the armor. "Mr. Calhoun, were you aware that the email you sent led directly to the unlawful detention of a federal agent?" "I didn't send that email." "Were you aware that the unlawful detention included denial of constitutional rights, physical intimidation, and threats of violence?" "I wasn't aware of any such incidents." "Were you aware that Sergeant Miranda Shaw, one of the officers who detained Agent Langford, was found dead in her cell under circumstances that remain under investigation?" Webb was on his feet before the question ended. "Objection. My client is not charged with anything related to Sergeant Shaw's death. This is prejudicial." "Sustained." Judge Okonkwo's voice was sharp. "Ms. Reeves, confine your questions to the charges at hand." "Of course, Your Honor." Reeves smiled. The damage was already done. The jury had heard the question, would remember it during deliberations. "Let me rephrase. Mr. Calhoun, are you aware that Kevin Wu, the recipient of the email from your account, has provided sworn testimony identifying you as his handler within the federal government?" Silence, long enough to feel uncomfortable. I am aware of Mr. Wu's allegations. They are false. False. Despite the documentary evidence, despite the forensic analysis, despite the testimony of a cooperating witness. Reeves shook her head slowly. Mr. Calhoun, you've spent 30 years building a reputation as an exemplary law enforcement officer. Is it your testimony that all of this evidence, all of it, has been fabricated to frame you? I believe there are individuals within the Bureau who have targeted me for political reasons. Political reasons? Reeves let the phrase hang in the air. Not because you ran a corruption network spanning 17 states. Not because you took payments from drug cartels. Not because you compromised federal investigations and endangered the lives of undercover agents. Just politics. Objection. Argumentative. Withdrawn. Reeves gathered her documents. No further questions at this time. If this satisfying already, hit that subscribe button. The verdict coming next will leave you breathless. The trial lasted 6 weeks. Serena attended every day that her schedule permitted, watched witness after witness take the stand, heard evidence she had gathered read into the official record, saw the case she had built become part of legal history. The defense tried everything: character witnesses, expert testimony challenging the forensic analysis, conspiracy theories about rogue elements within the FBI targeting Calhoun for political reasons. None of it worked. On the 43rd day of trial, the jury retired to deliberate. They returned in 7 hours, fast for a case this complex. The speed suggested consensus. The direction of that consensus became clear when the foreperson refused to look at the defense table. On count 1, conspiracy to deprive civil rights under 18 U.S.C. Section 241, how does the jury find? Guilty. On count 2, obstruction of justice under 18 U.S.C. Section 1519, how does the jury find? Guilty. On count 3, wire fraud under 18 U.S.C. Section 1343, how does the jury find? Guilty. 12 counts, 12 guilty verdicts, each one landing like a hammer blow on the reputation of a man who had spent 3 decades pretending to serve justice while undermining it at every turn. Calhoun showed no emotion as the verdicts were read, just sat still, hands folded, eyes forward. The mask he had worn his entire career, finally cracking at the edges, but refusing to fall completely. Sentencing will be scheduled for 60 days from today. Judge Okonkwo's gavel fell. The defendant is remanded to custody pending sentencing. Court is adjourned. Federal marshals move forward. Calhoun stood, allowed himself to be cuffed, walked toward the holding area with the same measured steps he had used to enter 1,000 meetings and 100 courtrooms. But this time, he wasn't walking toward power. He was walking away from it, forever. The hallway outside the courtroom was chaos. Journalists shouting questions, cameras flashing, attorneys making statements that would appear on evening news broadcasts across the country. Serena slipped through a side door, avoiding the crowd. She had no interest in cameras, in glory, in becoming a symbol of anything larger than herself. She had done her job. That was enough. Her phone buzzed. Text from Holloway. Conference room 3. 5 minutes. She found him waiting with 2 other agents. Torres, who had been with her since the Phoenix raid, and a younger man named Patterson she didn't recognize. The sentencing guidelines suggest 15 to 20 years. Holloway's voice was flat, professional. Given Calhoun's age and the severity of charges, he'll likely die in prison. Good. The word came out harder than Serena intended. What about the rest of the network? Collapsing. Wu's testimony led to 17 additional indictments. 6 have already pled guilty, 4 are cooperating, the remaining 7 are trying to cut deals. Holloway pulled up a map on his tablet, pins marking locations across the country, each one representing a corrupt officer or official who had been identified. 31 terminations, 14 criminal convictions, 8 cases still pending. Numbers, statistics, the metrics of justice that never captured the full weight of what had happened. What about the Phoenix cases, the victims? 53 complaints have been reopened for review. 12 have already resulted in settlements or reversed convictions. Torres spoke up. The Chen case, Marcus Chen, the one whose sister approached you, is going to trial next month. Kelso's facing assault charges, civil rights violations, and obstruction. Prosecutors are asking for 8 to 12 years. Marcus Chen. One face among hundreds. One story among thousands. And Shaw? Silence. The name still carried weight, even now. Investigation is ongoing. Holloway's voice was careful. The official finding remains suicide. But the missing camera footage, the timing, the the circumstances. We're not closing the book yet. Not closing the book. Bureau speak for, we know something happened, but we can't prove it. Some victories were incomplete. Some questions never got answered. That was the reality of fighting a system that had spent decades learning to protect itself. What's next for me? Holloway set down his tablet. Met her eyes directly. That depends on you. The Inspector General's office wants you to stay in Washington. Permanent position, policy work, oversight reform, the kind of changes that take years to implement but actually shift how the Bureau operates. And the alternative? Field work. We're opening a new investigation in Miami. Similar pattern to Phoenix. Corruption, civil rights violations, connections to organized crime. Could use someone with your experience. The choice hung in the air. Washington or Miami, policy or action, the long game, or the immediate fight. How long do I have to decide? Take the weekend. Let me know Monday. Well, she spent Saturday in her apartment, staring at the ceiling, thinking about what she wanted, what she needed, what the work required. The Washington job was important. Real lasting change happened through policy, through systems, through the slow accumulation of reforms that eventually reshaped institutions. She had seen it in the consent decree that now governed Phoenix Metro PD, seen it in the new oversight procedures that were being implemented across the Bureau, but she had also seen the limits of policy, the way reforms could be watered down, ignored, reversed by the next administration, the gap between what was written on paper and what happened on the street. Miami was different. Miami was direct. Find the corruption, document it, bring it down. The same work she had been doing for 15 years, just in a new location with new names. The same danger too, the same isolation, the same knowledge that somewhere another shadow might be watching, waiting for the moment to strike. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She almost ignored it. Almost let it go to voicemail, like she did with most calls from numbers she didn't recognize. But something made her answer. Agent Langford? The voice was familiar. Female, older, carrying an accent she couldn't quite place. Who is this? My name is Margaret Okafor. I'm a journalist with the Washington Post. I've been covering the Calhoun trial, and I wanted to ask you some questions about what comes next. I don't give interviews. I understand. But this isn't really about you. It's about the system. About whether what happened in Phoenix can happen again. About whether the reforms mean anything or whether they're just window dressing? A pause. That's one way to put it. Serena should have hung up, should have ended the conversation and gone back to staring at her ceiling. Instead, she heard herself say, "There's a coffee shop on M Street, corner of 31st. Meet me there in an hour." "I'll be there." When Margaret Okafor was 62 years old, Nigerian-born, and had been covering federal law enforcement for 3 decades. She had broken stories that brought down senators and exposed corruption that reached the highest levels of government. She was also, Serena learned over 2 cups of coffee, genuinely interested in understanding what had happened in Phoenix and what it meant for the future. "The question I keep asking myself," Okafor said, "is whether any of this matters. Calhoun is convicted. Some officers are in prison. There are new policies, new oversight procedures. But the underlying conditions, the culture, the incentives, the way power operates within law enforcement, those haven't changed. Have they?" Serena considered the question. It was the same question she had been asking herself for months. Some things have changed. The consent decree in Phoenix is real. Officers are being held accountable in ways they weren't before. Victims are getting compensation, getting their records cleared, getting some form of justice. Some form, but not complete justice. Complete justice doesn't exist. Not in this system. Maybe not in any system. Serena wrapped her hands around her coffee cup. What exists is incremental progress. One case at a time. One policy at a time. One person at a time who decides they're going to fight instead of giving up. Is that enough? I don't know. But it's what we have. Okafor was silent for a moment, making notes in a leather-bound journal that looked like it had survived decades of interviews. "The piece I'm writing isn't about you specifically. It's about the broader pattern, the way corruption embedded itself in law enforcement institutions, the way it was exposed, the way it's being addressed, but I'd like to include your perspective, not as the hero of the story. I'm not a hero, but as someone who has seen how the system works from the inside, who understands both its failures and its possibilities." Serena thought about it, about the risks of speaking publicly, about the enemies who were still out there, diminished but not destroyed, but also about the people who needed to hear that fighting was possible, that the system could be challenged. That one person, with enough determination and enough evidence, could make a difference. What do you want to know? The interview lasted 3 hours. Okafor asked about everything: Phoenix, Tucson, Washington, the network, the investigation, the personal cost of spending years undercover in hostile environments. Serena answered honestly, not revealing classified information, but not hiding behind bureaucratic language either. When it was over, Okafor closed her journal and looked at Serena with an expression that was hard to read. One more question. Off the record. Go ahead. Was it worth it? Everything you went through, everything you sacrificed, the relationships you couldn't maintain, the life you couldn't live. Looking back now, with Calhoun convicted and the network falling apart, was it worth it? The question struck something deep, something Serena had been avoiding since the trial ended. Ask me again in 10 years, when I can see whether any of this lasts, whether the reforms hold, whether the people who come after us do better than the people who came before. She stood, gathered her things. Right now, all I know is that I did what I could. The rest is up to everyone else. Monday morning, Holloway's office. I've made my decision. He looked up from his desk, waited. Miami. He nodded slowly. Not surprised, maybe a little disappointed. The policy work is important. You could do real good here. I know, but I'm not ready to stop fighting, not yet. She sat in the chair across from him. The people who did this, Calhoun, Shaw, Kelso, all of them, they got away with it for decades because no one was willing to do the hard work, the field work, the dangerous work. If I step back now, if I move into policy and administration, who takes my place? Someone else, someone younger, someone we train. Then I'll train them, in the field, showing them how it's done. Serena leaned forward. Give me Miami. Give me 2 years. If I don't find anything, I'll come back to Washington and push paper for the rest of my career. And if you do find something, then we take it down, same as Phoenix, same as Calhoun, same as every corrupt system that thinks it's too powerful to fall. Holloway studied her for a long moment, the calculation visible in his eyes, weighing risks and benefits, assessing whether she was the right person for this assignment. Miami is dangerous. The cartels have connections at every level of local law enforcement. We've lost 2 agents there in the past 5 years. I know. You'd be going in with minimal backup. The local field office has been compromised. We're not sure how deeply. You'd be operating almost alone until we can establish who's trustworthy. I've done it before. Phoenix was different. Phoenix, you had 18 months of preparation, a network of support, protocols in place. Holloway shook his head. Miami is a war zone, and we're asking you to walk into it with almost nothing? Almost nothing is more than some people have ever had. More than the victims of these systems have ever had. Serena stood. I'm going. The only question is whether you're going to support me or not. Another long pause. Then Holloway smiled. A rare expression, one that transformed his usually stern face into something almost warm. You know, when you first joined this unit, I thought you were too idealistic, too convinced that one person could make a difference against systems that have been broken for generations. And now? Now I think you might be right. Or at least right enough to be worth the risk. He pulled a folder from his desk drawer. Flight leaves tomorrow at 6 a.m. Cover identity, contacts, everything you need is in here. Read it tonight. Memorize it. Destroy it before you board the plane. Serena took the folder, felt its weight in her hands. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Thank me when you come back alive. The flight to Miami took 3 hours. Serena spent most of it reviewing her cover, financial analyst for a consulting firm, recently relocated from Chicago, looking for a fresh start in a city where no one knew her name. The cover was simpler than Phoenix, less embedded. She would be operating at the edges of the investigation at first, gathering information, identifying targets, building the foundation for a larger operation. Different city, different names, same work. The plane touched down at Miami International at 9:15 a.m. By 10:30, she was in a rental car, driving toward the address that would serve as her base of operations. Her phone buzzed. Text from an unknown number. Welcome to Miami, Agent Langford. We've been expecting you. She read the words twice, felt the familiar chill of being watched, being known, being targeted before she had even begun. The shadow might have been in Washington, but it had friends everywhere. She typed back, I know, that's why I'm here. No response, just the silence of an enemy who had revealed themselves and retreated back into the darkness. Serena set the phone down and kept driving, toward the next fight, toward the next corrupt system that needed to be exposed. The story wasn't over. Might never be over. The work continued as long as there were people willing to do it, systems willing to resist it, and victims waiting for someone to finally listen. She was still willing. And that, in the end, was all that mattered. 6 months later, Miami. The warehouse sat on the edge of the Everglades, surrounded by sawgrass and silence. Inside, Serena stood with a team of 12 agents, weapons drawn, waiting for the signal. All units confirm ready. The radio crackled with responses. Alpha Team, Bravo Team, Charlie Team, all in position. Execute. The doors came down. Flashbangs detonated. Agents poured into the building with practiced precision, securing rooms, cuffing suspects, seizing evidence. Serena moved through the chaos with the calm of someone who had done this before, who would do it again, who had accepted that this was her life, not the quiet existence of policy work and administration, but the loud, dangerous, necessary work of fighting corruption wherever it took root. By the time the sun rose, 14 arrests had been made. 3 local police officers, 2 federal agents, a city councilman, a judge, and at the center of it all, a cartel lieutenant who had been paying all of them for years. Not the end of the network, just a piece of it. A tumor removed while the cancer continued to spread through other organs. But it was something. It was progress. It was proof that the fight could be won, one battle at a time. Her phone buzzed. Text from Holloway. Good work. Come home when you're ready. She looked at the sunrise, at the Everglades stretching toward the horizon, at the city that had tried to kill her and failed. Home. The word still felt strange. But maybe that was okay. Maybe home wasn't a place. Maybe it was a purpose, a commitment, a refusal to stop fighting until there was nothing left to fight. She typed back, "Not yet. There's more work to do." And there always would be. The end.
Thank you for taking the time to watch this video today. If you found the content helpful, please remember to like and subscribe so you won't miss our upcoming episodes. If you have any questions or suggestions, feel free to leave a comment below. We are always here to listen.